Berserker is not meant to be a caster. We the players have been told time and time again, stop it. Stop making spellcaster Zerkers. You see this beautiful generic increased damage node? Poof! Now it's attack damage specific. Trying to make a spellcaster with that! And I truly began to lose hope. That spellcasting as a Zerker was a lost cause until Cluster Jewels, when GGG threw out the playbook for having specific damage and just gave us an all-you-can-eat buffet of generic damage scaling. It's everywhere in clusters, but I once again am going to be focusing on Warcry jewels, specifically Crywolf, Provocateur, and Mob Mentality. Crywolf is the most broken of the Warcry jewels. We stack up to 8 of them, solving our life and mana sustain, as well as the damage we could want in one fell swoop. With just 8 of these, we boast 3,000 plus life regen, 100 plus mana regen, 1,000 plus increased damage, which also allows us to throw on RF for even more damage. Now, between our 8 medium clusters, we grab 6 Provocateurs and 2 Mob Mentalities. 6 Provocateurs to scale our Warcries a bit more, as well as provide us with some generic crit for our attacks and spells, while 2 Mob Mentalities gives us about 70 to 80% uptime on a Berserk, giving us 30% more movement speed, 20% less damage taken, and 20% more attack speed. For our weapons, we grab dual Shimmerons, as we have a boatload of regen and are not even phased by the degen from Shimmerons, allowing us the best crit damage scaling weapons in the game, pairing nicely in our cast on crit spell slinging build. For our jewelry, we focus on life, crit multi, and attributes, as well as some resistances and accuracy if you can fit them in. For our helmet, we focus on grabbing one with a reduced rage loss per second enchant, and ideally crafting one with a power charge in life by slamming it with a Warlord's Exalt and fossil crafting it afterwards. From there, you can specialize based on spells you plan to use. I myself planned around min-maxing some lightning spells, so I went for -9 lightning res plus the Awaken Orb combo with the power charge. Next up, our boots we grabbed a pair with cooldown recovery speed and Tailwind, and Awaken Orb them together, as Tailwind is great for mapping and damage, and cooldown recovery speed lets us trigger our spells much more often. Budget options would be choosing one or the other plus life and movement speed. For our belt, we grab Flow Untethered, which gives us life recovery speed, cooldown recovery speed, and Harbinger of Time for a bargain of a price. Ideal case would be a very high life belt with cooldown recovery speed and life recovery speed, but I'd imagine this would be very hard to craft, and I didn't bother trying because I didn't really want to spend the time on it and didn't have the budget for it. With our body armor, we grab high life and high resistances. You could also min-max it with your own flavor if you chose to say, hey, I want an explode mod. You can get an explode mod. We're not stopping you. Last but certainly not least, for our gloves, we once again are using our 6+ to Warcry gem levels with Hands of the High Templar. These more than likely will be extremely hard to come by, as only a few pairs exist. I got them for a bargain of 4x. I doubt you could get them for like less than 20x or something. They're crazy good. Alternatively, I'd recommend going for +4 gloves or Breath Stealer, which you can anoint another maximum power charge for even more damage. Now, let's go in game and go over gem links, the passive tree, and the playstyle. Welcome, we're in game now, and we're going to go over the gem link setup. To start off with, we have Enduring Cry, Righteous Fire, Rallying Cry, all linked to Empower. This is basically the most important things to have plus gem levels on, and if you have the plus level gem level gloves, then you want them all linked up in here. Next up, for our wand offhand, we have a low level Precision, a high level Berserk, and Flame Dash. Basically just get over ledges whenever we run into them. So now we're getting kind of into the creative atmosphere where it's really kind of up to you to decide what kind of spell sling, what kind of cast on crit spells you want. The reality is the build has generic scaling. You can use whatever spells you want and in whatever fashion you want to use them. So don't feel like any of this is set in stone. Really make it your own. Have fun with it. Do something you enjoy. Don't necessarily just copy what I do here. So to start off with, we have basically 3 spell sling setups. You'll notice whenever we cast a spell, there is basically 3 things that happen for the most part. Well, actually, no, I think there's 4 things that happen, but I can't see the arc. But yeah, it's hard to see the arc. Okay, you can kind of see it at first. But anyways, the arc is in a power charge on crit, inspiration, and Spellslinger setup. So one thing I'll say this about Spellslinger, if you're using Spellslinger setups, you need to make sure you have them with low mana multiplier skill supports. So you'll see I use Inspiration a lot, I use Power Charge on Crit a lot, I use Onslaught, Coal, stuff like that. So we can generate Coal, we can generate Onslaught, we can generate Power Charges, and they're decent damage supports while also not making our Spellslinger cost a lot to reserve. So that's our helmet setup. For our wand, we actually have 2 Spellslingers. We have Wave of Conviction and Elemental Weakness, both linked to Spellslinger. That's so whenever we Spellsling, Elemental Weakness is going to make their resistances go a lot lower, while Wave of Conviction will make their lightning resistances lower. So that way we do a lot more damage with our lightning spells. Next up, we have a Power Charge on crit, Culling Strike, Spell Sling with an Orb of, or a Ball's Lightning, I was about to say Orb of Storms. But basically what this does is every single time that thing shoots out, it generates a bunch of Power Charges as well as culls enemies. So that's just like 11% more damage on top of whatever we were doing, as well as getting us Power Charge generation. Without Power Charges, our build does not do a lot of damage. If you notice, because we're not critting, our damage is dependent on us critting. And you'll notice in a lot of this sequences where we spawn a boss initially, we're not doing that much damage until we generate those power charges. Once we generate those power charges, the boss gets melted. So last but not least, we have an Awaken cast on crit. This is not essential. Frankly, there's a good chance I have more cooldown recovery speed on my character than I can actually generate crit charge or crits for casting on crit. And I haven't done the math or anything, I'm just guesstimating. I just went for as much cooldown recovery speed as possible. You do not need Awaken cast on crit. It's a very expensive upgrade. Just get regular 21 or 20/20 cast on crit, you'll be just fine. For the setup, I have in it Arc, I have Inspiration, I have Lightning Pen, and I have Shock Nova. So basically, oh, and it's all linked to Barrage. Barrage is the best for cast on crit because we generate multiple hits from one cast, which allows us to crit a lot more often. Other notable uses are Frenzy, our Kinetic Bolts, our Power Siphon. Those are all kind of decent options for while you're mapping, but at the end of the day, single target wise, you want to be using Barrage for this to generate lots of crits. Alright, so that kind of goes over the the Gemlink setup. Now let's go over the flasks. Flask, we went for Wise Oak, Bottle Faith, Diamond Flask, and a Granite, and a Quicksilver. End of the day, Bottle Faith is very expensive. You don't need this. This is actually a lot more monumental for builds that don't have a lot of flat crit chance. We are using Shimmerons, which means we have a lot of flat crit chance from our Shimmerons, which means Bottle Faith is a lot less valuable in this build. Although it is still very strong for our build, it is 100% not necessary. You can still go with something like an Inziri's Promise and get a lot of damage out of that. So do not feel like you can't get a Bottle Faith, you can't afford it, the build's dead. Without this, the build is absolutely fine. You'll still crit plenty. And then you want stuff like Remove Freeze, Remove Bleed. If you can't keep your lightning resistance higher or whatever element you're using for Wise Oak. I just realized I'm probably not even capped high enough. Oh, I actually am. Okay, never mind. I am capped for lightning resistance to penetrate. I forgot if I was or not, but that would have been a little bit awkward. Now let's go over the passive tree. So for the passive tree, it's pretty simple. We're going all the way around the outer rim, grabbing power charges and grabbing all the outer clusters. You'll see here we went for 2 Voices Jewels. I have 5 passive Voices Jewels. You can do it with 7 passive Voices Jewels. They're 20x cheaper per, and you're basically losing a level every time you have a 7 passive over a 5 passive. It's just one more travel point, and that's a-okay. Pretty much picture it like that. It's like we have to drop some life nodes here. We would drop these 4 here, and we pick up like a life node here and a life node here, or you just level 2 more times and you're at the same spot. But basically, that's how it is. We get the Voices Jewels. We have basically our 6 jewels, which all have the same thing, Crywolf and Provocateur, and then at the end of them, they all have a jewel socketed. For the middle cluster, we go for rare jewels with life and resistances. You'll see it's just a bunch of life and resistances. I think I had attack speed on for wands with one of those, and maybe attributes. And then for this outer cluster here, we all go for split personalities with accuracy and flat life. This basically makes it so we have a very good hit chance with our wands, as well as giving us a lot more flat life for our build, which is really nice for upping our EHP pool. And last but not least, the large cluster over here, we go for Crywolf Mob Mentality. Just with 2 of these, we have pretty much full uptime on our Berserk. I'll show that later. And then we have some Fettles in here for extra life. You don't necessarily need Fettles here, since we have so much more extra life points we haven't even grabbed. You could also go for just life and resistance jewels again, and grab these extra life nodes everywhere that's just sitting out. You don't necessarily have to go for Fettles. And for a large cluster jewel, you pretty much all you really care about is getting a 8 passive point jewel, and you want Arcane Heroism on one of the travel nodes. More or less, this just gives us like 13% more spell damage. And if you have a really high budget, you can go for a 3rd Voices Jewel here, but it's completely unnecessary, and this will do you just fine. trying to think if I forgot anything. Oh, I forgot I even had this. At one point I was doing some Frostbolt Ice Nova combo, which is also a great Nova combo for damage. In which case you'd want a Frozen Trail, but I completely forgot I don't even need that, and I wasn't even using it at the end because I was messing around with lightning spells. So that's the gear, that's the passive tree. Let's go over the Ascendancy. The Ascendancy, we go for Berserker with Warbringer. This is one of the most vital nodes of the tree. It basically gives us 100% uptime on our Enduring Cry and Rallying Cry because it gives us a lot of cooldown recovery speed and it gives us a lot of duration as well. And on top of that, it gives us 15% double damage as well as 20% attack speed, and we get recover life, 25% life and mana whenever we use it. Think about it this way. Whenever we pop this Rallying Cry, which we pop it every like second, we're getting 25% of our life per second from that one node, which is absolutely crazy sustain. That's on top of our already, we'll see here, our already 3,600 life regen per second. So we're basically regenning almost 100% of our life per second between the War Cries and the Enduring Cry from that Ascendancy node. Next up on our Ascendancy node, we grab Aspect of the Carnage. It takes basically all of our Spellslinger setups, all of our cast on crit setups, and it adds a damage link. So you see this and you think, oh, Wave of Conviction, that's on a 1 link, but actually it's a 2 link with Aspect of the Carnage, and then it goes the same thing for all of our other setups here. Same with when we have a Righteous Fire on. That's like having another damage link. So our Wave of Conviction, it's actually on a 3 link, and it's doing, you know, a decent amount of damage, even though I'm solely using it to reduce enemies' resistances. Oh great, now I'm gonna have to keep up my Rallying Cry. Next up you'll see we have Rite of Ruin, Crave the Slaughter. All this basically does is gives us a lot of attack speed and a lot of movement speed as well as higher sustain on our Enduring Cry. I'm gonna forget about it now and die, which will be fantastic. I should not have activated the Righteous Fire, but because I just have to manage it by keeping my Enduring Cry up. So anyways, attack speed, movement speed. That's what you get out of Rite of Ruin and charge generation. So that is the passive tree, that is the flasks, that is the Ascendancy. For Pantheon, we went for Soul of Solaris, got everything there, and also Soul of Ralakesh just to avoid being blinded, because blinded would really screw over our cast on crits, and we also made so we can't be maimed, and we have a little bit of damage reduction against bleeds. For our bandits, I believe we either killed all or we killed Alira, and I really can't remember at this point. It's one of those two. Last but not least, let's go over the playstyle of the build. More or less what you do is you get into a map. I initially always do Rallying Cry first. This thing lasts 40 seconds. You just have to make sure you have it up every 40 seconds. Basically, every 40 seconds, you'll see I'm holding down my left click. I have Enduring Cry on it. It's constantly being casted. Basically, it's always up. The second I want Rallying Cry, or like Rallying Cry is getting low, I then hold down the E key, and it'll get recast on the next time the cooldown happens. So you just want to do that once, just every 40 seconds, keep your Rallying Cry up. If you don't have that up, you're not going to be doing damage. There was a couple clips in there where I forgot my Rallying Cry up, and you're like, man, it doesn't look like he's doing as much damage as before. It's just because I forgot to keep my Rallying Cry up. Next up on the agenda, while we're mapping, we pretty much are always activating Berserk. You'll see we're walking like this, pretty slow, right? The second we activate Rage, we all of a sudden get 30 movement speed. We mix in our Quicksilver, and all of a sudden we're a pretty fast-moving little character here. We also look a lot bigger. We look a lot cooler. We do more damage in that we attack faster, as well as we take less damage. It's very nice. We can keep it up for a while. You'll see eventually it's going to run down. When it does, there's a cooldown on Berserk. By the time it gets all the way back, we can reactivate it again, and we will actually out-regen the rage charges, get it all the way back up to close to 50, and we'll keep going. And eventually it'll go through the same process where eventually degens. Basically the moral of the story is here, we keep a very high uptime on our Berserk. One other thing I'd want to notice is you can't just have your Enduring Cry on your left click alone. When you stop to DPS something, you all of a sudden stop casting Enduring Cry. You will die in this scenario. You need to make sure you also have another key like W, so you can press that as well while you're DPSing the boss, keeping it up, making sure you have it. So that's basically the play style. You can sustain Righteous Fire, you can sustain the degen from Shimmerons, and you can sustain the degen from Rage or whatever it is. And frankly, you sustain it really well. Like you can get hidden maps for half your life, and you'll still regen it in less than a second, you know, type of deal. You have that much sustain. None of these other degens even come close to touching you. So that's the character. I had a lot of fun with this one. I hope you guys also will have quite a bit of fun with it. You know, make it your own. Figure out whatever spell setup you like, whatever crazy things you want to do, whether that's some movement speed. You'll see in the video I mixed in body swap, lightning warp, but I had no control over my character. It was fun for about a map, and then I got tired of it, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Alright, this is Captain Lance. You guys have a good one.